I hope everybody is ready for the exciting discussion about small farms, about the challenges for these small farms in European Union. We have a lot of farmers here. I saw in the CVs a lot of experts who are sitting near the table are actually involved directly in agriculture. It's a very good news because we know better what we have to do for these family farms, which is the way we must be prepared for them in the next years. Our first speaker is actually our former minister. And for him, it's a huge challenge to be a prophet in his own country in this complicated period. And we know, as a director in DG Agri, he must be equidistant. He cannot be a Romanian director, but we are here in the Romanian presidency, and we are quite interested to hear what is the DG Agri position about the new programming period. Mr. Dumitru is a specialist in economics and agri-food and rural development. He has a PhD in economics. As I told you, he's a former Minister of Agriculture in Romania, and he's right now the Deputy Director in DG Agri. Mr. Director, you have the floor. Please share our ideas, our vision about the small and medium farms, about the challenges of new technologies, and the markets. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice presentation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, please allow me to thank the Romanian Parliament under the Romanian presidency organizing this debate. I would like today, after you have discussed yesterday, I suppose the most important budgetary aspects, to bring you some elements of the Commission proposal for the future CAP. As you know, the Common Agriculture Policy remains one of the big policies which use an important part of the EU budget. But I would say not only use an important part of the EU budget, but it's also a common policy which has a very important role in Europe. Today we are going to talk about small farmers and their role and how we see them in the next period in the policy. Of course, the digital revolution is coming, and we have to see how prepared we are to face this digital revolution. And of course, when we talk about farmers, we have to look into the whole value chain of the agri-food sector. So, first of all, talking about the small farmers. We have in Europe about roughly 11 million farmers. 1/3 of these farmers are located in Romania, so 33%. And many of these farmers, if we speak only in terms of physical terms, I mean in terms of hectares, they are considered small farms. 66%, they have less than 5 hectares of agricultural land, and only 7% have more than 50 hectares of agricultural land. This is based on the farm survey, the last one. So close to half of these farmers, 47% of these small farms, they are located in Romania, and 11% they are located in Poland. And 66% of these all farms with less than 5 hectares occupy only 6.2% of the total utilized agricultural land in EU 28 still today. While 7% with 50 hectares or more, they cultivate more than 68% of the utilized agriculture area. So this is why we're talking about small farmers, and we have to see what we propose in the next period in the policy for these farmers. You know, the common agriculture policy was and is still often accused of unfairness. And this is because of the famous or infamous 20-80% ratio. You know that 20% of the beneficiaries, of the farmers, they receive 80% of the direct support provided under the common agriculture policy. But this is mainly because the payments it's somehow directly or indirectly linked to land. And this reflects this, let's say, share of farmers and the share of land they are cultivating. So in this chart, you can see that 51% of the farmers below 5 hectares, as I mentioned, they cultivate 6% of the land, and they only receive 2.4 billion out of the total envelope for direct support. 48% of the farmers, 3.29 million farmers, they receive the bulk, 72% of the direct support. They receive 29.3 billion, and they cultivate 72% of the land. And the last one, so the farms we consider big, which are above 250 hectares, they also receive, they cultivate an important share of the land, 22% of the utilized agricultural area, and they receive 9 billion euro. So, you know, this shows that very much the CAP support, direct support, mirrors the farm structure, and this accusation should be seen in the overall context. If you look into this situation in each member state, you will see that this is very different from one member state to another. What is considered small in one country, it can be bigger in another country, and vice versa. So this is why, for the new period, 2020-2027, the Commission has made a new proposal for a CAP reform, and one of the main preoccupations was to ensure a fairer and more efficient distribution of support. And in this new proposal, the Commission has paid a lot of attention to supporting small and medium-sized holdings, and also to support installation and bringing in young farmers and farmers that will start activity. And most of these people coming in, they will not start with large farms. They will start probably with a small and medium-sized business. So how we propose to do this improved attention to the small farmers? Probably yesterday, when you discussed about the multi-annual financial framework, you touched upon this issue. So first of all, we propose, the Commission proposed a reduction of the direct payments, progressive reduction above 60,000 euro. And then when they reach 100,000 euro, a capping. So this is probably the bad news for some of the farmers. But then the good news is that this money, this product of capping, they remain in the member states. And they are used in a redistribution effort to target especially the small and medium-sized farms. And this is why, in parallel with this reduction in coupling, there is a proposal to have a compulsory redistributive payment, and also for the member states continuing with the historical reference with a model of distribution of aid based on entitlements, they also have the possibility to continue the internal convergence. So this is not so much the case in the new member states of the Union, which are applying a flat rate, which are applying the single area payment system. And then there is another aspect where we want to target those most in need of receiving public support. It is the so-called definition of genuine farmers. So we have tried in the current period to exclude from payments the so-called SOFA farmers. So the principle is that we should not provide public support for the businesses where agriculture is only a minority activity. So therefore, we should concentrate on what we call farmers. I mean, we call them active farmers. For the future, we propose to call them genuine farmers. But this is very much based on the conditions of each member state. So therefore, we propose a framework definition, but this definition can be translated in the specific situation of each member state. As I mentioned to you, we dedicate a particular focus for the generational renewal, and we would like that at least 2% equivalent of the first pillar envelope to be dedicated by each member state for encouraging the installation and the development and bringing in new farmers. And of course, we also propose a couple income support, which is sometimes disputed inside the European Union because they may have distortive effects on the internal market. But we have this form of support, and we consider that it is important to especially address the needs of sectors in difficulties. So, because the small farmers, they will probably require a lot of administrative burden for a small amount that these people will receive, then we propose in the proposal an alternative. Instead of going to all the elements of the first pillar, and I will show you here the composition now of the direct payments support. So the member states, they have the choice to decide to pay a round sum to the small farmers, and they have the freedom to decide on this amount. And this is an optional for farmers, so they can still opt for the full system or for the simplified system, but member states then will have to decide. You know, this idea is to promote a more balanced distribution of support. And of course, there is one aspect related to the new proposal is that all farmers, including the small one, they are subject of fulfilling the enhanced conditionality. Because, you know, one of the key aspects of the new common agriculture policy is an enhanced ambition for climate and environment. But sometimes there are voices saying, but for the small farmers, this is too much burden if they have to fulfill all these conditions. But, you know, on the other hand, you have to be aware that these farmers, they manage 8% of the EU agricultural land. They represent 48% of the beneficiaries. So we are not going to be serious if we provide an overall exclusion of these farmers for these conditions, which are very important for our future objective, which is environment and climate. But the member states, they have the possibility to modulate and to organize, because in the new proposal, we give the member states a lot more freedom to design, and you know, we propose this new delivery model, which is result-based and which is based on simplification and a lot more subsidiarity. And member states, they have the freedom to fix elements, and including some possibility for the small farmers not to apply in the same way the conditionality like for the big farmers. So this flexibility exists, and it should be taken into consideration. Of course, these are the possibility under the first pillar, but then in the second pillar, you know, we said that unity makes the strength. Small farmers, we always try to encourage them to cooperate and to improve their position in the value chain. And we have a lot of possibility in current period, which will be maintained in the next period, to allow small farmers to become more powerful, to cooperate. First of all, we talk about the cooperation, which can take the form of different form of cooperation. And I would especially mention the European Innovation Partnership, which involve the creation of operational groups, which put together farmers, advisors, academics, businesses, financial institutions, to find solution to their own needs. And especially we are talking about innovation and digital revolution, and I will refer to this later on. And this is very, very important to allow the small farmer to access this kind of technologies, to find out possibilities to adopt this technology because they are small and they do not have the same power like the big one. Of course, a very important aspect is participation of the small farmer in quality scheme. European policy, it's a policy based on quality food. And especially the one producing the quality food, especially the geographical indication, the PDO, PDF, and this is mainly the small farmers producing this. You know, you have this geographical indication which is regional, which is mostly traditional recipes, and they are the small farmer delivering on this. Of course, we always try to encourage the small farmer to associate and to create producer groups, producer associations. And we continue our leader approach, which is a bottom-up approach, which is based on local development strategy of local solutions, where the small farmers, they have a very important role to play. No, I will not want to stop and to refer myself only to the proposal for the CAP for the future. You know, we were working in Europe since more than 10 years now to address the issue of the weaknesses of the small farmers in the value chain, and especially this concentration and the value chain which concentrate most of the added value towards the end of the value chain in the retail. And therefore, for years and years, we have tried to regulate what we call the unfair trade practices. And the good news is that we finally managed. So, on the 12th of March, the European Parliament has endorsed this long debated proposal, and we hope that in the first half of April, the Council will do it, and for the first time, we will have at the European Union a directive which will regulate and which will stop, which will ban, will punish use of unfair trade practices. So the basic principle for this is that we should protect the smallest, the weakest, against the strongest. Then there are 16 explicit unfair trade practices which are banned. Then this directive provides a minimum enforcement power, and the member states, they will designate empower a competent authority to empower this, and this also foresee a coordination mechanism at the European level. So I will not insist more on this, but just to give you some examples of practices which will be banned by this directive. It's late payment for perishable food products, last-minute order cancellation, unilateral or retroactive changes to contracts. So as you can see, from now on, not only because the initial proposal of the Commission was trying to protect farmers against the other big actors on the value chain, finally, after the co-decision, we ended up with a directive which protects the weakest against the strongest. And this is the principle. So every time you have in a value chain a supplier and a buyer, so you have to protect them let's say in a cascading, and this protection stops at 350 million turnover. So let me now move to a very important aspect for the future common agriculture policy, which is how to modernize agriculture and how to modernize the common agriculture policy. First of all, we have many, let's say, new technology coming on us. And digitization, of course, is very important. And digitization and the use of new technologies is very important for sustainability and competitiveness in agriculture in rural area. I will have to say that primary sector is and will be changing significantly with the availability and multiplication of modern technologies. Just to give you some examples, you know, the artificial intelligence or the big data or the satellite, these are very, very powerful tools which are going to change completely the businesses in the agri-food sector. So therefore, we have to prepare our farmers, our sector to cope with this, to use this technology and to use them for the benefit of themselves and for the society. But for this, we need to develop a knowledge-based, a smart agriculture. And this supposes, first of all, that our farmers, they are equipped not only with financial possibility to use this technology, but they are also getting the skills and the knowledge. So this is very important that we promote a knowledge-based agriculture, where we provide at the same time the tools and the knowledges. So for this, we propose in the new proposal a cross-cutting objective, which is knowledge transfer, innovation, and digitization. So the member state, they will have to explain in the CAP strategic plan, they will prepare for the implementation of the policy how they are going to to promote this exchange of knowledge and how to promote the innovation and the development and uptake of the new technologies. Of course, the cooperation is very, very important. You know that in the same time in Union, in the European Union, we have dedicated additional resources for research because we need additional knowledge. And we have the Horizon Europe, the future research program of the European Union, which is probably one of the few programs that got additional support. And for the agri-food chain and bioeconomy, we got additional reinforcement, a doubling of the budget for the next period. We got 10 billion euro for this purpose. And of course, we are going to continue with the European Innovation Partnership, which we consider as a very useful tool, policy tool, to promote and use and disseminate knowledge and to develop innovation. So let me very quickly now move to how we can use the modern technology. First of all, in Europe, we have developed at the EU level a very solid infrastructure, which is based on Earth observation mostly. And we have a Galileo, a satellite, which is an alternative to the GPS, and this is very important for precision farming and agri-logistics. We have a very important system, EGNOS, for augmenting accuracy, which is very crucial again for the way we handle businesses in agriculture. And we have Copernicus, which is providing data and services, and also data and information access services. So these are very, very important elements which can be used by the farmers, but also by the policy in adopting these technologies. So then they can be used by the farmers in their daily business, and I would like to move into this. We are proposing for the new period a farm sustainability tool for nutrient, which is based on combining information the farmer can use from the satellite with a very good resolution, and mixing them with the information they can get from the management system of the Common Agricultural Policy, the IAC system and the LPIS system, the Land Parcel Identification System, and with sole information. And this can be a very useful tool, first of all, for a win-win situation where the farmers can use the adequate level of nutrients and inputs. So in the same time, they are getting an economic advantage, and in the same time, they are protecting environment and only using the necessary inputs that are necessary for getting the most optimal, let's say, production. So this is proposed now as a kind of elements of the new enhanced conditionality, but being based on the digital technology and a digital application which the Commission is developing. This will also help the small farmers to get in using largely these digital technologies. I have only one element, and then I will stop my presentation, and this is about how we can modernize the Common Agriculture Policy using the digital technologies. And you know, there are a lot of potential, and we already started in this period, and we would like to continue in the next period to use these Earth observation tools and to replace the controls we are doing in the field with monitoring by satellite. And this is a very powerful tool which is cost efficient, which is very precise, and we believe that this provides a strong potential for a reduction of bureaucracy, simplification, the life of the farmers and the administration and the Commission. And with this new technology, we can, let's say, promote a modern way of managing a policy which is distributing money to a very large number of beneficiaries. So as you can see in the new proposal of the Commission, which is now in the discussion in the co-decision, so on Monday I just attended the last exchange of view in the European Parliament Common Agriculture, the ComAgri Committee, the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development, and I understand that the vote is foreseen for the 2nd of April, and the Vice Chair of the committee is here, she can tell you more. The Council, under the Romanian presidency, they are advancing towards getting a partial general approach by June, and this is the objective set by the Romanian presidency. So we are working with the two co-legislators to advance with this proposal, and we hope that this proposal will enter into a phase of trilogue so that we can adopt this new proposal and we can put it in practice, and our farmers, including the small farmers, our society, can benefit of the next common agriculture policy. Thank you very much. I stop here and I am ready to participate in the discussion and to answer questions. Thank you.
Vă mulțumesc, domnule director. Am avut o prezentare foarte bine structurată.
Thank you very much. This was a very well structured presentation with a clear vision of the Commission on the future of small farms, family farms. We had a clear vision on the transfer of technology and on the food side and on the role of the European Commission and of the European Parliament in supporting small farms compete with large traders. I would like to highlight again the idea presented earlier, the rule of 2080. Yesterday we've had an interesting debate on the budget, and all the stakeholders indicated they did not agree with a budget cut. However, we need to be aware that 80% of this budget will go into the pockets of the 20% of the farmers. This is why our discussion today on small farms is so important. Indeed, there was good news on the ban of unfair trade practices. And again, I am happy that the transfer of technology is a priority for the Commission in the case of small farms. The next speaker comes from Romania as well, is the Vice President of the Commission for Agriculture and Rural Development in the European Parliament. He is a lawyer, PhD in law. He's a mediator, an arbiter, and he has a complex vision on the role and the fate of small farmers in Europe. On the one hand, he sees the institutional mechanisms helping out the farmers, and at the same time he can see the solutions which might help them compete with or achieve these short trade chains, and the help which can be provided under legal conditions to small farms in their competition with large farmers. Mrs. Zoană is a well-known specialist in the field, and now I pass her the floor. Mrs. Zoană, you have the floor.
Morning. I'm very happy and very honored to be here in Bucharest on this very important conference organized and hosted by Romania. Because I'm here in the heart of Romania, in Bucharest, and because it's the Romanian presidency of the European Union Council, please allow me to speak in my mother language. Doamnelor.
Ladies and gentlemen, President, dear guests, it is my great pleasure to meet you here today to discuss a very important topic, more specifically, how to encourage small farmers in the new budget context, in the digital revolution in the food chain. As Vice President of the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee in the European Parliament, I believe that small farmers are the basis of the European agriculture and economy. We must make available for them the means and the tools they need, because they represent a very important chain, a very important link in the food chain. Most European farms are small and medium farms. Small-scale agriculture also can contribute to supporting the production model, to increasing security within the food chain, to fostering and enhancing the economy and the social and territorial cohesion within the European Union. Strengthening the agricultural or the low-scale agricultural performance, this is essential for the social and territorial cohesion of Europe. Young agricultures often face lots of obstacles in establishing and developing their farms. I am a great supporter of young farmers, maybe due to the fact that I have the same age, but also because without encouragement of young farmers, agriculture cannot advance. The obstacles include the obstacles faced by young agricultures include complex legal frameworks and the financial costs due to initial lack of resources. This is why the first 5 years are very important for the long-term viability of a farm. Young farmers have been long facing such challenges, and the common agricultural policy has always provided measures to help them. But the most recent reform includes measures which are specific both for young farmers and mandatory for member states, and they strengthen the support granted to young agricultures or farmers. A new revised common agricultural policy would favor young and small farmers, and the Commission proposal for 2021-2027 includes a new agri-environment scheme and a fund for young agriculturers, for young farmers. It is essential to have support for research and technology to support the role of agriculture within the EU. The multi-annual financial framework for 2021-2027 proposes a 10 billion budget for research and innovation projects in the food field, in the field of agriculture, rural development and bioeconomy. I strongly support the need for relevant innovation to have a multifunctional agriculture within the EU and to overcome the gap between theory in research and practice in agriculture. We have 5 priority fields for research and development. The first one is the efficient resource management, especially the soil, the water, nutrients and genetic resources, to reach a balance between productivity and the environmental objectives in agriculture. Healthier plants and animals with a focus on pest control and a holistic approach in terms of health. Integrated environmental approaches, for example, research to improve services, ecosystemic services, and development of specific agricultural systems such as green agricultural systems and mixed systems. New research, new agricultural research, new business models, digital shifts to support rural economies, strengthening human capital and social capital, and strengthening rural areas by counseling services and demonstrations in rural areas. Horizon 2020 includes most of the research targeting agriculture in the EU, but the interactive innovation model proposed by the Commission can still be improved. The Commission analysis during the proposal development has impact on the development of strategic plans for the new common agricultural policy, and all member states should contribute to this. More specifically, the strategic plan for the common agricultural policy of each country should include a section to foster exchange of information, such as consulting and research services, and means to connect them, including to connect stakeholders in producing, using, and sharing knowledge in the field of agriculture. Such new technologies will be able to modernize the sector, to encourage business innovation, and to create new business opportunities. The new technologies could benefit at all levels of the value chain. Digital agriculture is expected to change the traditional network of stakeholders around the farms. Besides traditional stakeholders such as suppliers, distributors, wholesalers, and we note that the new players, the startups, enter the network and introduce the necessary technologies and expertise to analyze data generated by agriculture and by the food supply chains. The precision agriculture is creating a revolution in agriculture with high precision and capacity to manage the raw materials, the water, and reduce the quantity of pesticides in sick plants. We all want that by applying these new proposals of the common agricultural policy, we should have a modern policy which keeps pace with the new technologies so that Europe can cope without problems at international level. And since we are all here, I want to communicate the new strategies or new negotiations on strategic plans. I am convinced that we are all expecting to see the final decision on the capping. On Monday, there was a debate, there was a meeting of the rapporteurs, and as expected, the most debates focused on Article 15 on capping. We all know very well the initial proposal of the Commission. We all know the reversal, but so far the European Parliament have had intense debates on capping. Romania, by my voice, fought very much for voluntary capping. You do know that there are voices in the European Parliament which want this cap to apply for the initial amount proposed by the Commission, which in my opinion is unacceptable low. I kept my word, and as I promised, I fought for voluntary cap to be able to protect small farmers, but to be fair to the large farmers as well. The European Parliament will come with a proposal which might mean voluntary capping and will leave it for the member states, but it should meet certain requirements. Basically, we may speak of voluntary capping only if the member states want to adopt this solution and if the redistributed payment will give at least 10% so that a small farm may exceed the maximum cap per hectare. So only if the member state decides on 10% redistributive payment, then they won't have the obligation of capping. But if the state pays 5% or below 10%, then this cap becomes mandatory at 100,000 euro, which does not include the eco schemes, namely point 28 of the report. It does not include young farmers and the 50% salaries. To conclude, the European Parliament proposal includes a cap of 100,000 euro only if the member states does not grant 10% redistributive payments. And this does not include young farmers, eco schemes. So we could speak of voluntary capping only if the member state intends to adopt this and grants 10% with redistributive payments. These are the latest news. This was the negotiation in the Agricultural Committee this week. Thank you. Thank you for such recent information. Thank you for your presentation. The debate becomes more and more interesting, and we are taking important steps in solving this issue, which has been intensely debated. From 2080, we already reached 3070, and we are on our way to helping small farms, but we keep an eye on the large farms as well, because they are an important part in Romania's economy, at least. Thank you again, and I will now pass the floor to Mr. Tomislav Panemic, President of the Commission for Agriculture in the Parliament of Croatia. They will have a crucial role in finalizing such discussions if they are not finalized during the Finnish presidency. Mr. Panenic graduated economic studies. He is a member of several committees in the Croatian parliament, and since 2017 he's been the president of the Committee for Agriculture. Mr. Panenic, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanzos. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, at the first beginning, I will thank to the Romanian Parliament and both committees to include agriculture and cohesion issues in the framework of your presidency of the Council of the European Europe. Today, we are living in a Europe that is different than it was a few years ago. It is different even when we are looking decades ago. And a significant part of the overall socio-economic development of the Union can be seen from the successes and the failures of the common agriculture policies that has undergone since the founding of the Union to today. I do not intend to enter into the discussions related to the European security, Brexit, reflection of the Russian embargo, obligation arising from the environment protection, and market instabilities. But it is important to mention them in order to revive the impact on the European agriculture. I believe that there is no union policy that made so many specificity and diversity in the member states, such as agriculture policy, and raises so many questions we need to answer. From the wide range of the agriculture teams, I would especially refer to the needs of the small agriculture producers within the framework of the future agriculture policy. The Commission has presented to us measures to preserve the vitality of the rural areas and provide adequate income for the agriculture producers. But the basic question is, who do we want to support with the European funds, and whether synergy can be achieved in the proposed contradictory activities? We all agree that we need to support agriculture production of both small and large systems. However, the real question is whether we can maintain specific business skills in such a combination and provide instruments to strengthen their resistance. In the production of the more added-value products, we are witnessing the strengthening of the trends of processing capacity development in the more developed economies of the Union, while the less developed member states are becoming raw material bases, facing high labor costs, infrastructure shortages, and a limited level of competitiveness. On the other hand, the crisis caused by the concentration of the capital in the agriculture directly affects the decision to abandon agriculture production and reduce the number of the small and medium agriculture producers in the most member states. The same suggests the dysfunction of the existing system and the need to create a more effective market regulation policy, because the existing liberal market approach did not foresee sufficient space for the position and sustainability of the small agriculture producers. Their presence on the international market is, I would say, the exclusivity of some branding of specific productions, such as, for example, wine and olive oil, Small agriculture producers mostly do not have the logistics following which will do market research or do marketing mix and do brand of their products. This is a platform where small, I would dare say even middle-sized farmers need help. High standards of the food safety, traceability of the products, origin and quality of the products of small agriculture producers needs to be exploited, while marketing and market position related education should be a mandatory activity in the future common agriculture policy. The lack of the equality of the participant in the common market also generates differences in the national markets that are reflected through the unequal standards of food safety and quality and market security. Some member states have regulated unfair trading practices, and the Commission, as we heard, proposal for a directive on unfair trading practices in the food supply chain has been included in the legislative procedure. But experience that we have in the Republic of Croatia with the implementation of this law, we have it already, emphasize the importance of speeding up the procedures for prohibiting unfair trading practices. Only one country, several countries, is for sure not enough. We all should fight against unfair trade practices. The injured parties in this process are mainly small farmers who, due to their weak negotiation power and limited access to the market, encounter unfair trading practices that have a great impact on their business. Stronger advocacy of the value of joint participation and association, both nationally and at the European level, encouragement by the means of policy instruments represents the road towards association which should be related with a policy of good trade practices. But I would stress, especially for the younger member states, it is necessary to take into consideration negative experience regarding nationalization of the land and property of the agriculture cooperatives from the early communist times. Developing the link between agriculture, tourism, HoReCa through short supply chain, and positioning of the diversified agriculture activities need to be further stimulated, but also the elements of conditionality need to be simplified. The impact of the new agriculture production technologies, which greatly facilitate and accelerate agriculture processes, should be smartly directed to avoid the phenomenon of agriculture without farmers because of survival of the rural areas. The problem of migration of agriculture workers to other sectors or more developed member states arising from the structural transformation process in the number of the younger member states is the result of the limited access to public goods, financial instruments and the market, negatively affected development of the resistant local agriculture structures. Small farmers are giving life to rural areas, employing and influencing local economies, while large industrial farmers add value beyond rural areas. Disappearance of small farmers also affect the variety of the foods available in the European market, while supply through the short supply chain increase food safety. In this program period, 50 member states have programmed small farmer schemes and were generally aware of that fact that incomes in the agriculture sector stay behind incomes in other sectors. Producers are faced with a risk they cannot influence. Public goods, financial instruments, and the market face restricted access. And I will stop with those problems, but conclusion is the small farmers are faced with several problems. It is up to us to affront them and direct further growth and development of small agriculture producers. To conclude, I would say that regardless of the size of the farms, the existing subsidy intensity leads to the additional imbalances and disparities in the position of farmers in the old and the younger member states. The set objectives of the balanced development presume equal starting position, Thus, it is necessary to equalize things in practice and a more even distribution of resources between member states. Finally, I will raise one of the most important questions we are listening more and more. Are our farmers still dreaming European dream? For many years, there was something like a European dream. Politicians taught and preached about united Europe, a continent of peace, solidarity, tolerance, and economic prosperity. At the beginning, people felt united and excited about the future, without borders, frontiers, divisions. Europe has no alternative, politicians repeat for years. However, the last decade has proved to be very challenging for the dream. Dream came close to reality, and some of the economically less developed countries in Europe became a part of the EU. And although I want to believe in the EU, from time to time it is hard to me to hold on that dream. When I see our farmers unemployed or working for peanuts, when I see others leaving the country because they see it is the only way to live a decent life, when I witness my dear ones getting more skeptical, and all I hear are empty promises of a better life in a magical place called EU. I cannot blame farmers for sometimes they are losing their faith. Numerous of the poor and desperate farmers are becoming poor and more desperate as times go on. So, dear colleagues, do farmers still dream the European dream? Or their dream is becoming more and more a nightmare? Or, dear colleagues, are we still dreaming the European dream? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are all part of this dream, and depends on us how will be the reality. Because after this dream, each farmer, day by day, in every morning, must wake up and start to work in their family farms. And you have absolutely right when you say that we need more efforts to assure more space for the small farmers on the market. And at the same time, we need effective solutions to stop these unfair market practices. Thank you so much for your speech. Our next speaker is Mr. Thierry Delesky. He is Secretary General of the European Landowners Organization. What is very nice in his CV is that he started some decades ago to run a family farm, and he has a huge experience in vegetables, sugar bean, potatoes, and cereals and flowers production. Currently, he is member of the board of several industrial and patrimonial companies regarding agro-industry and real estate. He's also been active participant in a number of working groups regarding CAP reform, Natura 2000, forestry, EU enlargement, food safety, and so on. Mr. Secretary General, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My pleasure to be with you. First of all, I'd like to introduce the ILO. My organization is a Farmers and Land Managers Organization. We do represent in all the countries farming organizations, such as in this country, LAPA, which is well known from the Romanian. In France, it will be the grain producer. In Lithuania, because they are present, I cite it. I cite them, it's a family farmer, so it's not a matter of size. What we mean with land, it's more the asset. All the farmers are owning a family business. And what they have in common ground, they have land, and most of them are tenant and owner. Personally, I'm an owner and mainly a tenant, and I'm in a business as a farmer. Well, we are discussing today small farmers, and you all know that agriculture is undergoing a steady but non-dramatic process of structural change, which reflects the normal process of structural transformation. However, we know that it is not easy for the power to and the authorities to organize that. Europe has about 10 million farmers with an average of 15 hectares when our competitors in the US are 2 million farmers with an average size of 180 hectares. But we are on the same market, don't forget that. The largest part of the farmers, of the biggest country providing farmers, is this country, followed by Poland and Italy. And this is leading to consider that there is still a very large number of very small farms, primarily run in part-time fashion, often subsistence of semi-subsistence. And what we have also to be attentive to, and it is important in political terms, run by elderly farmers, which means that even if the number of those small farms have declined substantially over the year, they still represent the majority of farmers in Europe. And the agricultural sector is the one which is the most common for, where it's most common for people to continue to work after the age of 65. It's another very important political issue. So it means that in the next 2 decades, the number of small farmers will decline when generations passes, and that there is a subtle duty of the CAP is to moderate social disruption and also make sure that the generation can have dignified retirement while assessing the structural development towards more viable economic units which offer prospect to the next generation. And let's not forget that young farmers, usually the ones who are holding bigger farms, are the most educated and multiculturally open farmers we have in Europe. So there's an important perspective toward the future. But the process of structural transformation in the EU is largely on track, and we do recognize that the CAP is playing a very positive role in the reduction of poverty and the creation of better jobs for farmers. We know also that half of the member states have been able to turn agriculture into a key sector for shared prosperity in rural areas. But it also means that our European agriculture comprises a wide variety of type and structure of rural businesses. And the fundamental principles underlying those enterprises are secure property rights and intergenerational management. Due to consideration of the various scale, the legal and management structure of this business must be taken into account at European level. And when we are discussing encouraging small farmers, is more than a size discussion, a capacity discussion. Whatever the type and the size of farming enterprise, it is more important to promote sustainable intensification in Europe, and as well as keeping our rural business competitive and environmentally friendly. It is clear that policy should continue to help improve the productivity of farmers and make sure that we remain competitive with suppliers in other parts of the world. So there's a tension between the two, the economic reality and the political objective we have to implement. Therefore, we are opposed to the proposed capping and aggressivity in general. Why? Because this measure runs counter the desire for increased environmental performance. If you cap what is requested to mitigate the climate change, well, you will never achieve the goal. And also it's the wrong message to send to the young farmers and to the young generation. Why should they come into the business if they know that there's little perspective to develop their business, of at least that this perspective will not be recognized by public authorities, they will have a very negative feeling. Look at the proposal of the Romanian presidency. Well, we understand it's a very clever proposal, although if you say every member state gets the opportunity to do it voluntarily, we have a problem because we generate internal distortion of competition. And therefore, we are a bit skeptic about that, although we recognize the great work done by the Romanian presidency. But due also to, we also welcome the continuation of the small farmer scheme for the reason I did explain, and we scrutinize the idea of genuine farmers. Well, it might generate a lot of administrative problems, and we invite you to consider the last omnibus definition. The decision of the omnibus regulation was fair and well-balanced, and we think that if we have to change the definition of who is a farmer every 2 years, well, it is generating discouragement and also a lot of questions about the stability of the policy. Another way to encourage small farmers is to guarantee basic public service provision, roads, power, advisory service. And this implies more effective coordination between the European funds, EAFRD or the European Regional Development Fund and Horizon Fund. So please, simplification also in terms of use of the funds. We also have to make sure priority has to be considered for investment for the young farmers. And in parallel, diversification and multifunctionality are becoming more important to rural entrepreneurs, and European regulation should support such initiatives. About the food chain, I won't say too much because Dimitru has explained that, but for us, it is obvious that the highly fragmented structure of farming puts farmers in an economic position wedged between highly concentrated upstream suppliers and the almost as concentrated buyers of our products. And therefore, we welcome the political agreement on unfair trading practices. I will not expand that. I want to take another point, is please continue the support for agricultural producer group. It is an important tool, but also we should make sure that some people does not mislead them in investing in the wrong solution or in passive solution. Going to digital revolution, there is still huge disparities between rural and urban area in Europe. When in urban area you have access to the broadband at 96% of the population, only 75% of the population of the rural area get access to. So there is a problem, and we have to first make sure that they get access to that technology in order to implement precision farming. Precision farming is not only a matter of farming, it's also a way to offer to farmers and rural population new modes of working. So the common agricultural policy should help them, but we have to question how to make those tools available for small farmers. And you know, you all have been used, you all have the experience to use IT tools. If you don't use that regularly, you don't have access to it because the effort is just too important. And this is the fear for small farmers if they have to work on the IT 3 or 4 plot of land, such as this was shown previously. I really question about the capacity, the ability to do it properly. They will be discouraged. So they need to be supported and to be put into a framework. We also welcome the intention that the use of satellite data and ICT will be further improved in the future. But farmers should have advantage of that. And we do believe that the online application should be simplified, with, of course, pre-filling by member states and by authorities. But it is also very important and fundamental that we move from a control and sanction system, thanks to this implementation of technologies, towards guidance and correction one. In the past, 30 years ago, administration was a partner. Today, not anymore. We hope to come back to a partnership between the farmers community and the administration. But we remain concerned over both privacy and data protection. Farmers need to give consciously their agreement when companies want to use their data. It is a fundamental issue. So the use of technology can lead to simplification, can help to transform tensions between agriculture and environment, but we also have to consider that there is much resistance in our society in the use of new technology in food production. And there we should think about to move away from restrictive, hazard-based interpretation to and to promote a risk-based assessment that balances environmental with economic necessity. It is crucial if we want to remain into the agricultural competition worldwide considered. So what I invite you to consider is to rely on scientific evidence and to try to base your decision on facts and not on emotion. Budget issue has been discussed. We also support what I heard from you yesterday. You're quite right. It's incoherent to reduce the budget at the time more and more is requested from the farmer. And therefore, if you request more from us, make sure that you are increasing the efficiency and the effectiveness of the policy you are proposing us. And also, I want to underline how important is the transmission to the next generation. So don't discourage them, send them positive message, make sure that they feel comfortable, that they don't feel annoyed to be farmers, they don't feel that they might be polluting and poisoning you. They are in a business, they need dignity and recognition of dignity. Help them to do that. And you know, I invite you to join us for the next Forum for the Future for Agriculture on the April the 9th in Brussels. The theme will be the next generation because this is fundamental. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. As you said, the future of the small farms, it depends on how we can deal with this issue of the generations, and you have absolutely right. Dear participants, we had 4 key speakers, and we will start. We start to hear your positions, your opinion about small farms, about the role and the future of the small farms in the European Union, about the technology transfer and the digital revolution, and how we can help the small farms to get their positions of the market and to keep it. We have 13 speakers who will address the conference. I ask the technical support to start the chronometer and to help us to do it in 30 minutes. We will take some minutes from our coffee break. We will have to drink our coffee faster. We will start with Mr. Pedro do Carmo from Portugal. Mr. Carmo, you have the floor.
Thank you. In first place, I wish a word to Romania. Thank you for excellent organization and hospitality. In Portuguese language, obrigado. Dear colleagues of the European national parliaments and all the representatives of the associations here present, I with a great pleasure that we were granted today to discuss the future of the CAP, of the small farmers and the food and farming. Opportunities like these are essential to research, understanding how now to legislate it at an European level and to better comprehend all national perspectives. You all know that food and farming will be the key insurers of the future and the correct regulated and legislated of the utmost importance. I see a way where we put the environment first, where we think a sustainable way to farm. I am a representative of a big area, small in population, rural community in Portugal. Farming is at the core of our economic activity, but the climate is changing, and the agriculture is changing too. Challenges like water scarcity, drugs and wildfires are having a big impact. We have to look to the regions where climate change is a major factor and try to create a system to mitigate those problems. The common agricultural policy after 2020 should look to that and try to create solutions for those farmers and communities in those emergency situations. This is new CAP needs as well to support extensive agriculture, less invasive to soils than more aggressive methods. We need to support local breeds of fauna and flora, support diversity in productions, and help the organizations of small farmers in order for them to grow in scale and value. Those farmers in areas that are becoming less productive cannot feel that they and began left behind. We need to develop communities in a climate-changing world to attract new populations and give back life to low population areas in order to obtain economic growth, jobs, sustainability, and diversity. This is a big problem we have to address: how to attract population to the rural areas, how to create hubs of innovations outside big cities. I hope we can tackle those problems in these 2 days of conference: how to have a robust agriculture in changing climate, and how to make the rural areas attractive to the new populations. All difficult challenges, but in their answers lies the key to the future. Thank you very much.
Mulțumesc, domnule Carmo.
Thank you, Mr. De Carmo. Mr. Ventura, you've got the floor, and Mrs. Kafantari from Greece is the following speaker.
I want to thank for another time the Romanian host for their excellent hospitality and the organization of this meeting. Next European elections on May are coming very short. The results of these elections will affect the finalization of negotiations and co-decisions with the Council regarding the future policy direction for CIP. CIP isn't only a financial tool, it's a tool of policy making and planning in the new conditions. The agricultural population is aging in EU. About 5.1% of farmers is under 35 years old. We must help new farmers. We need a new financial model, education, new technologies, and consultancy. With regard to research on agriculture, food safety and quality, we believe that particular emphasis should be placed on promoting knowledge, innovation, research in order to have a smart, sustainable CAP. The EU Horizon Europe programme requires increasing investments on food, research, agriculture, bioeconomy, etc. Digital technology is now present in all areas of economic and social activity. The comparative advantages for agriculture are many. Digital transformation of the agricultural sector is a one-way street, a street that we all have to follow. All involved parties have to cooperate: the state, academic community, agricultural enterprises, agricultural cooperatives, startups, and of course farmers, both old and new, in order to follow the country's agricultural development prospects toward the direction required by the CIP after 2020. In Greece, the long-term financial crisis has led a lot of young people to leave the big cities and move to Province. The recession has helped to increase the employment of highly educated human resources in the agricultural sector that are both more receptive to the introduction of innovations and, on the other hand, have considerable experiences in management and marketing. Our government has set as its main objective the transition of the Greek economy, hence the Greek agricultural sector and agricultural production, from traditional cultivation to modern methods through the exploitation of new technologies. In cooperation, the Ministries of Digital Policy and Agricultural Development are proceeded at a fast pace. The project is immediately launched and funded so soon enough 4,500 150,000 farmers will be able to utilize it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to ask you kindly to try to use effectively the 2 minutes. The next speaker is Mr. Antonio Ventura from Portugal. Mr. Ventura.
Thank you. Portugal have two ultra-peripheral regions, and we also have small farmers. We are different. Yes, we are different. And so, for the ultra-peripheral regions, it's urgent more support and more recognition for transport, for energy, and traditional products. For example, the milk production in the Azores is a traditional production, very important. No milk, no people. And it is urgent to make better use of the Article 349 of the treaty for the small farmers. It's necessary support and promote traditional specialties and organic production. It's necessary encourage the use of digital technologies. It's necessary developing new technologies and business models. It's necessary simplification. And it's necessary encouraging supply chain to become less complex and requires less time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Chassaigne from France. Please, you have the floor.
Je vous remercie. Je voudrais d'abord dire que la France parle d'une voix unique.
Thank you so much. France speaks on a single language, irrespective of the political opportunities for the various stakeholders. We have jointly defined priorities, among which 3 are related to today's conversation. Common agricultural policy to turn the agricultural domains to the collective approach and towards the encouraging of new agricultures. We also need to take care of agriculture because this is a survival matter for agriculture. In a third point, we need to take measures for the survival of the agricultural and rural areas. How can we define small farms? What are the numbers allowing us to define this time of exploitation of farm? We are faced to a type of definition, and I assume we need to orient things upwards. We shouldn't see that the small farmers are forced to make subsistence agriculture. Agriculture is a key field in economy, able to cope and to help us cope with worldwide stakes. This is not a marvel field. We can have
Sur le débat, la chaîne alimentaire, à notre avis, elle doit se faire autour de la
terms of reference, but we think that we need to develop production and to identify high-quality products able to cope with today's consumers' expectations. And small farmers have their own role to play. Research, of course, needs to be put at hand of everybody so that we can have a joint approach. And last but not least, let's not forget an essential point, that is the opportunity for all our citizens to benefit from enough revenues. France is evolving, we all evolve, and we need to take into account the production costs because agriculture needs to allow us to live, to survive.
Thank you for your opinion. The next speaker, Mr. Kafkarias from Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your hospitality and for organizing this conference. Dear colleagues, it is of utmost importance to support small farmers and in parallel to promote generational renewal through the provision of target incentives in order to address the aging of the population employed in agriculture and thus ensure the future sustainability of the agricultural sector. In this context, we welcome the incentives proposed in the framework of the new CAP as regards the lowering of the eligibility criteria for direct payments to young farmers for facilitating their first installation. Currently, Cypriot farmers face a multitude of challenges such as excessive land fragmentation and prevalence of small agricultural plots, high labor costs and limited access to capital. As an island, Cyprus is isolated from major export markets and has to deal with higher cost of transportation for agricultural products. The EU should take into account the particular challenges and local conditions of each member state in the provision of incentives and assistance. For the above-mentioned reasons, as well as for other reasons, we strongly disagree with the high priority given by the EU in tackling other prominent challenges, such as internal and external security threats, which is translated into higher investments in CSDP at the expense of the sustainability of CAP. Dear colleagues, the encouragement of young farmers is considered as key for the integration of new technologies and innovation in primary production and for the achievement of smart agriculture. However, we are seriously concerned about the capacity of small farms to cope with the increased demands of the digital revolution, whether the application of new technologies by small farms is cost-effective, whether small farms will be able to afford the extra cost of application of new technologies, and whether young farmers have adequate knowledge and administrative capacity to apply and benefit from increased financial resources in the framework of Horizon Europe program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kafkalias. Mr. Zrufin from Romania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Barna. I'm the Vice President of the Committee for Agriculture, Food Industry and Rural Development from the Romanian Senate. Thank you for this professional moderation of this second session of this Interparliamentary Assembly. Dear guests, dear colleagues, small farmers are the past, the present, as well as the future of the basic environment of the rural space in Europe. The future development of the CAP among connectivity and basic services needs to take into account the support of small farmers by clear approaches and clear rules in order to introduce them in the food chain. My intervention is based on a core goal assumed by Romania as a president of the EU Council, that is adopting the proposal for the EU Council and Parliament directive in terms of unfair trading practices. This proposal bans unfair practices such as delayed payments, cancel of orders without previous announcement, and forcing suppliers to pay wasted products. According to this proposal, such practices can be accepted provided they are subject to a previous agreement. This proposal of regulation is the result of 10 years negotiations with the main associations of agricultures at the European level. For instance, in Romania, there is quite a well-organized agricultural market due to the national and the European directives and regulations. Nevertheless, the great retailers take 80% of the food products by the enforcement of unfair trading practices towards the domestic processors and producers. If you allow me to give you an example of unfair practice, The Competition Council has sectioned 7 great producers, 3 retailers and 4 suppliers with total fines exceeding 19 million euros, with the clear allegation that they were in agreement to increase the prices. Such fines were enforced since they established the prices between the retailers and suppliers from 2010 until 2016. The small agricultural producers are extremely vulnerable towards such unfair trading practices because they don't have a comparable scale to their foreign counterparts, because they sell products towards consumers to a limited extent. They have specific norms in terms of unfair practices. This is a proof of increasing worries regarding unfair trading practices. I therefore greet the concern of all the member states, which is a necessary approach since Romania is president of the EU Council. We need to take all the measures to adopt this proposal, able to preserve the small farmers in Europe alive. Thank you, Mr. Trofean, for your almost brief intervention.
Mrs. Susanna Jenny, you have the floor.
Test English channel, can you hear me? English channel test, can you hear me? Lovely, thank you. I can't hear the... We are discussing about something very important for farming, especially for Italy. This is strongly related to 2 requirements: the subject of resources, their allocation, and uncertainty, Brexit, which shape the European Parliament will take, which will be the future for Europe. The Italian Committee on Agriculture is just carrying out some hearings with colleagues. We're talking about with our peers. Agriculture is very important to us. I agree with France. Let's think about small, modern, innovation-based agriculture. This will be our aim. We share the choices made to make distribution more equal in the first pillar. Okay to capping, okay to reviewing higher funds. Protecting small farmers means protecting the environment, fighting against climate change. In order to do so, we need to bear in mind the call that was made by FAO in February, the alert on biodiversity erosion. Okay to fighting unfair practices. We welcome this directive, and we are working at a domestic level. We are promoting a new law banning auctions toward low prices, and we need to reinvent. We need to change the PAC layout, the CAP layout. We need to change the payment criteria. We need to bear in mind that 1 hectare in plain intensively cropped is not the same thing as an hectare with extensive agriculture. We needed to introduce new criteria. Let me add another point. Small farms do not belong to young people only, but women and young people are the glance of a new agriculture, of a new innovation-based agriculture. If this holds true, we should not neglect helping young farmers, and it shouldn't be and helping young farmers shouldn't be a domestic priority only.
Thank you so much for this very true ideas. The next speaker is from Lithuania, Mr. Kazis Starkevicius.
Labą dieną. Ačiū šeimininkams.
Good afternoon. I'm grateful to the host for their hospitality. If I may, I would like to share some of my own observations. We talked about the reduced funding, the reduced total budget of CAP, and it's good that we're talking about capping of direct payments. However, we have to prevent the fragmentation of farmholds. We have to make sure that the funds are properly distributed, equally distributed. What I also liked was the distinction between active farmer and genuine farmer. However, the EU should also make more clarification as to who are the genuine farmers. Because we're currently dealing with a new type of generation in the agricultural sector, one which basically is engaged in subsistent agriculture rather than actual active agriculture. So I would like to encourage everyone to focus on this aspect as well. Thank you.
So much. I will give the floor to Mr. Staffan Eklöf from the Swedish Parliament. Mr. Eklöf, you have the floor.
Thank you. I represent an opposition party, but I want to thank the organizers for the conference and the splendid dinner yesterday on behalf of the whole Swedish Parliament. Thank you. Coming from a net-paying member state, I would like to see development of productivity in the member state agriculture, so that the need for subsidies will have decreased somewhat after the program period. European Union agriculture must be modernized. In other words, European Union farmer subsidies must lead to increased productivity and profitability. Let us ask ourselves, which are the tools we have? In Sweden, aggregation of farms has been the major driver of increased productivity. In some sense, it's natural. It's good in the sense that it increases productivity, but it can be bad in it doesn't sustain a living countryside as much. An alternative is research and innovation. Sweden is very positive towards that. In the suggested package and rules and budget, there is rather much focus on innovation. Very good. There can be digitalization, novel ways to produce and ways to market produce. What is absent, though, is the question of new plant varieties. Let us be honest. It's much more costly to invest in new machinery than it is to invest in new plant breeding material, such as seed. There are now a number of new plant breeding techniques with improved precision and which resemble naturally induced mutations. For political reasons, there is a deadlock, meaning that it is impossible to use plant breeding material produced by modern techniques. The European Union, I think, cannot afford to refrain from modern plant breeding. Wisely applied, modern plant breeding can strengthen both profitability and the environment. It is in the interest of all member states to make modern plant breeding possible, and it is the role of the Commission to take the lead and break up the deadlock. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will give the floor to Mrs. Michelle Mulherin from Ireland.
Thank you. Thanks to the Romanian Parliament for hosting this very important meeting in relation to the Common Agricultural Policy and Cohesion. I'm from the west of Ireland, and I can say that 71% of our population is deemed to live in rural area in the place that I live. And what makes the area vibrant is farmers and farm families, and they're predominantly involved in suckler and beef farming. They're very proud of the food quality, the quality of the food they produce, and also the traceability, and are not shy at stepping up to the plate in making sure that we deliver on climate change targets, other environmental objectives like biodiversity and protecting water quality. However, I can see that one of the biggest or the biggest issue in relation to farmers continuing on to farm and also intergenerational issues such as trying to get new farmers to take up farming is income. The income levels that farmers don't enjoy. It's very demoralising for farmers when they work very hard to produce food, and lots of times, particularly in my area, they don't even cover the cost of producing that food. And I welcome very much the Unfair Trading Practices Directive. We have to empower farmers, and we have to make sure that they get a proper price, or else quite simply young people who have the option of more education now, because of more education they have more options in relation to employment, will leave the land. And I can say that where I live will not look at all like it does now. We will not enjoy the same communities, the same lifestyle, and so CAP is absolutely vitally important, and therefore we have to stand strong to make sure that we don't have a reduction in the CAP budget as regards farmers. We tackle the poor position they occupy in the food supply chain, being price takers, because at the end of the day, farming is not optional. People have to eat, and generally speaking, we're not growing food in offices or factories. It's out on the land that farming is done, and we have to stand with farmers and make sure that as we go forward that the standard, quality and carbon efficiency of farming is ensured, and that's the responsibility of all of us. And just a final point in relation to the proposal of capping at the direct payments at 60,000. We are supportive of that, but we are not supportive of the idea that off-farm income would also be taken into account. Where I live, as I say, a lot of farmers farm, but they require off-farm incomes to supplement their income. Other than that, they wouldn't stick with farming at all, and them and their families would move away. So we wouldn't be in favour of introducing labour costs, other labour costs or off-farm income into the equation when calculating the 60,000 cap. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always nice to hear some opinions from people who are directly linked to the farmers, who are living in the rural area. I think it's very important to have this feedback always from the people who are really knows how the life is in small farms. I will continue with our friends from Poland. Mrs. Agata Borowiec, you have the floor, or Bratankis.
Thank you. Dear Mr. Chairman, dear members of the national parliaments and the European Parliament, the Polish government shares the approach proposed by in Poland. More and more food produced in small farms is distributed as part of a short food chain. Recent changes in legislative provisions have facilitated the sale of local food products as part of agricultural retail trade. In addition, the direction of changes in consumer preferences allows to conclude that the development opportunity for Polish agricultural producers, especially those with a small scale of activity, will traditionally be local products produced on the farm and sold as part of short food chains with the possibility of direct access to the consumer. The Polish government shares the approach proposed by the European Commission that the development and competitiveness of the European Union agriculture should be more reliant on innovation, new technologies, and advisory services, as well as agriculture, new processes such as the bioeconomy should be introduced. I'd like to draw your attention to the difficulties in the transfer in knowledge and the new technologies, especially in the structure similar to the Polish. So with the large number of small farms, in our opinion, the new CAP should deal with these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll close our speakers list with Mrs. Arampati from Greece, and the last but not the least, Mr. Georgalas from Cyprus. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your hospitality, dear colleagues. Let me share with you our core position regarding the crucial issue of small farmers in the framework of the new CAP and, of course, the digital revolution. It's commonplace that small farms in my country, Greece, and also in the EU, are small-scale farmers. But the contribution of small farms to creating rural employment, supporting rural societies and landscapes, and ensuring that traditional and local production continues, makes them a cornerstone of Greek and European agriculture. In my country, small-scale farmers suffer the most from the long-lasting financial crisis, mainly because poor small farmers do not have the collaterals to secure loans that would enable them to invest in agricultural inputs and equipment, to improve their incomes, and of course to provide living conditions for young farmers, which are the future of European agriculture. However, the estimated very high value of the ecosystem services provided by small farms versus industry farms suggest that they merit strong policy recognition and support. In my party, ND and EPP, we stress that clear guidance is needed for European support measures, which are not easily accessible to small family farmers due to excessively high costs. We emphasize the necessity that small farmers should be provided with sufficient support for policies such as digital farming, digital revolution, as well as the new opportunities derived from the new directive on UTPS, in order to improve the very little bargaining power in the food supply chain opportunities to innovate. Of course, we agree that CAP should be more market-oriented, leading to farmers making their production decisions on the basis of market signals. But on the other hand, we also support the continuation of an improved specific small farmer scheme to ease them. We support the possibility to rebalance payments towards small farms by applying a top-up payment on the first hectares using a sufficient percentage of the national envelope for direct payments. The second pillar of CAP should also have a range of targeted measures specified to tackle the socio-economic challenges of small farms. We call for a business startup aid of up to 15,000 euros or more per farm for the development of small farms, and a set of measures which provide for supplementary support, including investments in non-agricultural activities such as advisory services, knowledge transfer, information and demonstration actions, training, leadership and cooperation with the aim to improve the overall performance of small farms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Mr. Georgalas, you are the last but not the least. Should you close, please?
No, it's okay. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, dear colleagues. And first of all, I want to underline that Cyprus has a particular agricultural structure and specific production conditions. Cyprus has a huge number of small and very small farms and small-scale agricultural production. In addition, due to climate change, my country suffers from water scarcity due to long droughts, and as a result, the agricultural production cost in Cyprus is very, very high. Finally, Cyprus is a small, isolated market away from the rest of Europe. Taking into account all these difficulties, we do what is possible, especially to help young people who wish to take up farming. We need young people. We need a new generation of farmers in Cyprus. Nowadays, young entrepreneurs in Cyprus are turning to agriculture, which is being transformed by technological innovation, smart investment, and focuses on high value-added production. So it goes without saying that young people, new investments, innovation, and research are the tools that will lead to increase of our agricultural capacity in Cyprus. Dear colleagues, the new CAP model has benefits for our country, but also hides some traps. Cyprus may lose up to 40 million for the period 21 to 27 from the reduction in the CAP budget. I grant this opportunity to express our position towards the foreseen reduction of CAP budget. Also, we alarm as regards the sustainability of Cyprus and European agriculture. Our expectation is that the CAP budget should be maintained at the current level of funding for the new programming period. In this case, Cyprus will be committed to achieve the necessary agricultural economy reforms and to support research and innovation in sectors such as food and agriculture and rural development. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for the remarks and ideas. I will, even if our coffee nicotine level is lower and lower, I will give the floor to Mrs. Vice President to some closing remarks, some concluding remarks, and after that we have the coffee break in my right side. Mrs. Oana, you have the floor.
În primul rând, aș vrea să...
First of all, I want to express my gratitude for your wonderful interventions and for the high value of your contributions today. It is very important to note the wide participation of all EU member states in this conference organized by the Romanian presidency of the Council of the European Union. The topic today is very important for farmers in all countries represented here today, and I was very happy to see that we still have different opinions, which means we can build a better future for small farmers. I noted very special contributions and very valuable ideas. For example, what is a small farm in a member state, and if this would still be considered a small farm in a different member state. It's also very interesting to see the directive or the comments on the directive on unfair trade practices, because indeed the weaker suppliers should be protected compared to the stronger ones. Also, the strategic plans for the common agricultural policy were worthy of attention, and I'm very happy that we exchanged knowledge and ideas on the common agricultural policy and on the strategic plans. The development of digital technologies in agriculture, in my viewpoint, this is a desire that should not be lacking, because without digitalization we cannot be real competitors for third countries, for China, for the United States, and so on. Digitalization is a wish that should be present even in the smallest farm, regardless their financial capacity. We have also discussed the capping. Although today we have an event dedicated to small farmers, I could see from your interest in what the European institutions will decide, the European Parliament, the Commission and the Council. We will see their decision on capping, because this will impact both small and large farms. In Romania, we could say it will impact medium farms. But when we talk about capping, we need to take into account the specificity of agriculture in every member state. We discussed today the initial proposal of the Commission, €60,000, which was not successfully embraced by the European Parliament. The European Parliament is trying to help small farmers, but also large farmers. This is why today we have a brand new proposal following the latest negotiations. So the proposal is on voluntary capping only if the member state so wishes, with the obligation to grant 10% redistributive payments. Otherwise, we speak about mandatory capping at €100,000. So we are trying to find a sustainable solution with everybody's help. Sustainable solutions both for small and large farmers. Obviously, Mr. Panenic discussed about the issue of association. We need to strengthen the negotiation power and open access to the market. Obviously, I also noticed different opinions. For example, the intensity of existing subsidies would lead to imbalances and different positioning of agriculture, of farmers in younger or older EU member states. This was an idea tackled today, and it is very important to pass positive messages to the new generation. It is very important to tackle the problems faced by young farmers. We all agree that young farmers should not only be encouraged and helped, but we also need to focus especially on the development, on providing them the necessary support so that young farmers are able to build a sustainable business in rural areas. I also wish we should work together to put an end to people living rural areas, to depopulation. I raised this topic often in the European Parliament, and I believe that we all agree that each of us should contribute to repopulate the villages in our countries. Thank you very much. Once again, I highly appreciate the value of your contributions. the special contribution you brought to this conference, and I want to thank the organizer.